All right, so today we're diving into solo Kubernetes management.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, it is actually, it's fascinating stuff. So
hmm
how do you run a tight ship, with Kubernetes without running yourself ragged in the process?
Right.
That's the question. And luckily, we have this awesome guide called
Oh, yeah?
Solo K8s Management Tips for Mastering a Managed Cluster Without Burning Out.
I love that title.
Just the title alone.
Very reassuring.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I can do this.
Yeah, you've got this.
So that idea of mastering a managed cluster,
Right.
that's where this guide starts.
Yeah, that's really the first key, I think, to solo K8s sanity, like using a managed service like AKS or EKS or GKE.
Yeah.
Uh,
See, even I kind of assumed that was a given for anyone running K8s solo these days.
Yeah.
But it is worth digging into why it's such a sanity saver.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it this way. These managed services handle all of the background hum of Kubernetes. Like they're the ones that are automatically updating and upgrading and making sure things stay secure and patched.
Right.
So you're not chasing down every little version bump or worrying about security vulnerability.
Oh, that's huge.
Right. Yeah, and plus you get built-in monitoring tools so you can get, a view of the health of your cluster at a glance without having to set up a whole complex monitoring system from scratch.
Okay, so that alone removes like tons of stress, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But it gets even better, right? So what about when things go wrong? Because we all know they inevitably do.
Right.
How can I be on call like 24/7 if I'm just one person managing this whole thing?
Right. Well, that's where high availability comes in. These managed services are designed with multiple zones so that even if one zone has an issue, your applications can keep humming along. It's all about minimizing downtime, even if you're the only one at the helm.
Yeah, that peace of mind is priceless when you're doing this solo.
It really is.
So, and the guide has links to more info on each of those services,
Yeah.
which we'll make sure to include for everyone listening.
Right.
But even with those basics covered, Kubernetes can get complex. I'm already picturing myself like drowning in these configuration files.
Yeah, and that's where this powerful tool comes in. It's called Infrastructure as Code, or IAC.
Okay.
And that's all about defining your infrastructure. So like your servers, networks, Kubernetes resources, all of it is code. And tools like Terraform or Pulumi make this a reality.
So instead of like clicking around in a UI and hoping for the best,
Yeah.
we're writing code that defines exactly how everything should be set up.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's like having a blueprint for your entire Kubernetes world.
I like that.
Right. And then there are a lot of benefits. The first one is you get version control.
Okay.
So you can track changes and you can roll back if needed, almost like hitting undo on a messy config change. And then there's disaster recovery.
Okay.
Imagine like re-provisioning your entire environment with just a few lines of code.
Wow.
And then finally, it drastically reduces manual errors. I mean, we all make typos, but with IAC, those typos are much less likely to bring down your entire system.
Yeah, that misplaced comma is not going to
Exactly.
take down the whole ship. Yeah, much less likely. Okay, I'm seeing the appeal already, especially for someone managing everything solo. Absolutely. Yeah, less chance for things to go catastrophically wrong.
Right.
Okay, cool. And the guide includes links to resources for using Terraform and Pulumi with Kubernetes.
Yes.
So we'll include those as well. But IAC is just the beginning when it comes to solo K8s management.
It is.
Are you ready to hear about practically automating your way to freedom?
Okay. I like where this is going.
Freedom is my middle name, so I'm all ears when it comes to automation.
All right.
But for our listeners who might not be familiar with it, what exactly does that mean in the context of Kubernetes?
So there's this concept called GitOps.
Okay.
And it's essentially about managing your entire Kubernetes setup, both the infrastructure and applications, through Git repositories. So you think of Git as the single source of truth for everything.
Okay.
And then you use tools like Argo CD or Flux to automate all those tasks that we tend to do manually.
Oh, okay. So deployments, rollbacks, even configuration updates, all driven by Git.
Yeah.
That sounds like a game changer.
It is.
But honestly, my experience with Git has been kind of a mixed bag. Merging branches can get messy.
Sure.
How does GitOps avoid those kinds of headaches when we're dealing with an entire Kubernetes cluster?
That's a great question. And it really gets to the heart of what makes GitOps so powerful.
Oh, okay.
So with GitOps, we're not just managing code, we're managing the desired state of our entire cluster. And tools like Argo CD continuously monitor your Git repository and make sure that your cluster matches that state.
Oh.
So if someone accidentally changes a configuration, Argo CD will automatically revert it back to the desired state that's defined in Git. It's like having a self-healing system.
Wow, self-healing Kubernetes.
Yeah.
I'm sold. Sign me up.
Right. Yeah.
I can already see how that kind of automation would free up so much time and mental energy.
Absolutely. And because everything is tracked in Git, you have a clear history of all the changes, which makes rollbacks super easy and collaborative if you ever need to bring someone else in to help.
So I'm less likely to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And if I do, it's easier to fix.
Exactly.
That's a win-win.
Definitely.
Speaking of needing help, the guide also mentions the Kubernetes community as a valuable resource for solo managers.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Have you found that to be true in your experience?
Absolutely. The Kubernetes community is incredibly active. There are tons of forums and Slack channels where people are constantly sharing their experiences and solutions. So it's a constant reminder that you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
You can find answers to almost any problem, and there's always someone willing to help.
That is reassuring.
Yeah.
Especially when you're kind of diving into this world of solo K8s management.
Yeah.
It sounds like a great way to learn from other people's mistakes.
Right.
And avoid reinventing the wheel. So the guide specifically mentions the Kubernetes Slack community and the CNCF Kubernetes forum.
Yeah, those are great places to start.
Awesome. But getting back to automation,
Yeah.
the guide really emphasizes taking it beyond IAC and GitOps.
It does.
It suggests automating basically everything you can
Yeah, pretty much.
within your K8s workflow.
As much as possible.
So what are some areas that you would love to automate if you could?
Oh, so many things. I mean, like CI/CD pipelines,
Okay.
Using tools like GitHub Actions, GitLab CI, or Jenkins. Those can be really helpful for automating that whole process of going from code commit to live deployment.
So from pushing that code to actually having it running in the cluster.
Yeah,
Okay.
seamlessly.
Awesome. What about all the monitoring and logging that comes with running a Kubernetes cluster?
Right. Well, tools like Prometheus and Grafana can automatically collect metrics from your cluster and display them in beautiful dashboards. You can even set up alerts so you're only notified when something truly needs your attention. And for logs, the ELK stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana or Loki are fantastic.
Okay.
They can centralize your logs, make them searchable, and even trigger alerts based on specific events.
So instead of me constantly playing detective, these tools can do the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
And only flag me when there's something I actually need to investigate.
Yes. It's all about working smarter, not harder.
I love that. And speaking of working smarter, the guide mentions this idea of keeping your cluster stateless.
Right.
Which kind of caught my attention.
Yeah.
What does that mean, and why does it matter for a solo K8s manager?
It's a bit counterintuitive, but managing stateful applications within Kubernetes, things like databases that can really add a lot of complexity. Think about backups, replication, disaster recovery.
Oh, yeah.
It quickly becomes a full-time job in itself.
Yeah.
The guide recommends offloading that state management to dedicated cloud-based services whenever possible.
So instead of me trying to become like a database expert overnight,
Right.
I should leverage services like Amazon RDS for databases.
Exactly.
Or Azure Blob Storage for persistent data.
Yeah. These services are designed and maintained by experts.
Makes sense.
So you can focus on your application logic. And because they're cloud-based, they're typically highly available and scalable, which takes another burden off your shoulders.
Okay, that's making a lot of sense. It's about choosing your battles
It is.
and leveraging the tools and services that let me focus on what I do best.
Exactly.
But I have to admit, I'm already feeling a little overwhelmed by all this information.
Sure.
And I'm not even managing a cluster yet.
I get it. It's a lot to take in.
So how do you prevent yourself from getting burned out in this world of constant learning and complex technologies?
Well, that's a great question, and one that we'll explore more in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But for now, let's just acknowledge that you're not a robot.
Yeah.
You have limits.
Yeah.
And it's crucial to manage your energy wisely when you're managing a Kubernetes cluster solo.
Right. I like that. That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've covered so much ground already.
We have.
From the power of managed services and IAC to the magic of GitOps and automation.
It's a lot.
But I'm eager to hear more about the human side of solo K8s management.
Okay.
How to stay sane, how to stay productive, how to avoid burning out.
Right. We'll get into all that.
So join us for part 2, where we'll dive into those essential aspects of solo K8 success.
Looking forward to it.
Me too.
All right.
See you there.
See you there. Welcome back to our deep dive on solo Kubernetes management.
Okay, so in part 1, we explored some powerful tools and strategies for running a Kubernetes cluster efficiently. We talked about, leveraging managed services, embracing IAC and GitOps,
Right.
and of course, automating everything in sight.
As much as possible.
Yeah, and I love that reminder at the end that, we're not robots.
Right.
It's so easy to get caught up in the technical details and forget about the human side of things.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a really crucial aspect of solo K8s management, which is how to manage your own energy and avoid burnout. Because even with the best tools and strategies, things can still get overwhelming as your workload grows and your applications become more complex.
Yeah, it's like that feeling of starting a new project all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and then a few months later you're just drowning in to-do lists
Right.
and wondering how you got there. So how do we avoid that downward spiral when it comes to solo K8s management?
Well, the guide we're exploring today offers some fantastic advice on exactly that. It starts by emphasizing the importance of planning for scalability from day one.
Okay.
It's much easier to build in scalability from the beginning than to try to retrofit it later on when you're already hitting capacity limits.
That makes sense. But I have to admit, the word scalability always sounds a bit abstract to me.
Sure.
What are some practical steps I can take to build in that scalability from the get-go?
So the guide recommends leveraging a couple of powerful features that are built right into Kubernetes. The first one is horizontal pod autoscalers.
Okay.
So picture these as your automated scaling heroes. They automatically adjust the number of pods that are running your application based on real-time resource demand.
Oh.
So let's say your application suddenly starts getting a ton of traffic.
Yeah.
The horizontal pod autoscaler will spring into action and spin up more pods to handle the load,
Oh, wow.
ensuring that your application stays responsive.
So it's like having an elastic container that kind of expands and contracts depending on how much stuff we're putting into it.
Exactly.
No more manually adjusting resources or scrambling to provision new servers when there's a traffic spike.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it.
That's awesome.
Okay.
So what about the other feature you mentioned?
Right. So then there's the cluster autoscaler, which operates at an even higher level.
Okay.
Imagine your cluster as a container ship that's carrying all your application containers.
Okay. I like this analogy.
As the demand for your applications grows, you need a bigger ship to carry all those containers.
Makes sense.
That's where the cluster autoscaler comes in. It automatically adds or removes nodes. Think of them as the individual sections of the ship based on the overall resource requirements of all your applications.
So if I have a sudden spike in demand across multiple applications,
Right.
the cluster autoscaler steps in and adds more nodes to my cluster so everything can keep running smoothly.
Exactly.
And then if things quiet down, it removes those extra nodes to save resources.
Got it. It's like having a self-adjusting infrastructure that adapts to your needs growing and shrinking as required.
I love it.
Making sure that you have enough resources to handle those peak loads, but you're not overspending on unnecessary infrastructure when demand is low.
Okay, I can already see how those two features alone would take a huge weight off my shoulders.
Yeah,
It's like having a built-in safety net that prevents my cluster from collapsing under pressure.
it is.
So the guide also emphasizes the importance of documentation, which
Right.
I have to admit isn't always the most exciting part of the job.
I hear you on that. But good documentation can be a lifesaver, especially when you're managing everything solo.
Yeah, that's true.
The guide recommends documenting everything.
Okay.
Your configurations, your procedures, even any quirks or workarounds you've discovered along the way. It's like creating a treasure map for your future self.
So if I encounter like a weird error,
Right.
or I need to remember how I configured something months down the line,
Right.
I can just refer back to my documentation instead of spending hours trying to retrace my steps.
Exactly. It can save you so much time and frustration.
Yeah.
And good documentation is also invaluable if you ever need to hand off responsibilities to someone else, whether temporarily or permanently.
Okay.
It ensures continuity and prevents those "how does this thing even work"
Right.
moments.
Right. Okay. I'm starting to see the value in taking the time to document things properly.
Yeah.
It's like an investment in my future sanity.
It really is.
But I also want to circle back to the human element that we talked about earlier.
Yeah,
Even with all these automation tools and scalability features,
right.
I can still imagine getting bogged down in the day-to-day tasks of managing a Kubernetes cluster.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why the guide dedicates a whole section to practical strategies for managing your time and energy effectively.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah.
What kind of strategies are we talking about?
Well, first and foremost, it emphasizes the importance of setting clear boundaries between work time and personal time.
Okay.
It's easy to blur the lines when you're working solo,
Yeah.
but having designated work hours helps you avoid burnout.
That's something I definitely need to work on.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to get hyper-focused on a problem and completely lose track of time.
Right.
And before I know it, it's dinner time and I haven't moved from my desk all day.
It's a common trap, especially in the world of tech. But setting boundaries is crucial for maintaining a sustainable pace.
Okay.
It's like training for a marathon. You wouldn't try to run 26 miles on your first day, would you?
Definitely not. I'd probably collapse halfway through.
Exactly. The same principle applies to managing a Kubernetes cluster solo. You need to pace yourself, take breaks, and recharge your batteries so you can stay focused and energized in the long run.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any other strategies the guide recommends for avoiding burnout?
It also talks about the importance of delegating tasks whenever possible.
Okay.
Are there any low-priority tasks that you could offload to someone else, even temporarily? Or perhaps there are tools or services you could leverage to automate some of those repetitive tasks that are draining your time and energy.
You know, delegating is something I definitely struggle with.
Yeah.
I have this I can do it all myself mentality.
Right.
Which is probably not the most sustainable approach.
It's a common trait among solo K8s managers,
Yeah.
but it's important to remember that you don't have to be a superhero.
Yeah, that's true.
It's okay to ask for help or delegate tasks to others.
So it's about recognizing my own limits.
Yes.
And leveraging the resources that are available to me. And that includes things like automation tools, managed services, and even other people who can lend a hand.
Precisely. And the guide also reminds us that building a strong support network is crucial for solo K8 success.
Okay.
This could include connecting with the Kubernetes community, attending meetups, or even just having a few trusted colleagues you can bounce ideas off of or vent to when things get tough.
It sounds like we're talking about a whole ecosystem of support that can help solo K8s managers thrive.
Exactly.
It's not just about mastering the technology, it's about cultivating the right mindset and surrounding yourself with the right people.
Well said. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. Solo K8 management is a marathon, not a sprint. It's about finding a sustainable pace, leveraging your resources wisely, and taking care of yourself along the way.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation so far.
It has.
We've gone from the nitty-gritty details of automation and scalability to the crucial importance of managing our own energy and building a support network.
It's a lot to cover.
But there's still one piece of the puzzle we haven't explored yet, the future of solo K8s management.
Right.
What trends or technologies should we be keeping an eye on as we navigate this ever-evolving landscape?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So join us for part 3 as we delve into those exciting possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking all about solo Kubernetes management.
We have.
And it's clear that it's not just about the tech, it's about how us humans actually work with it.
Exactly. And that leads us to a question I find really fascinating, which is, what's next for solo K8s management?
Okay, so we've got our managed services, we've got our automation humming along, and we're taking care of ourselves.
Right.
So what's on the horizon? Give me a glimpse into that crystal ball.
Well, one trend that's gaining a lot of momentum is the rise of serverless platforms.
Okay.
And these platforms abstract away even more of the underlying infrastructure. So, we talked about managed Kubernetes services, which take care of the control plane and nodes.
Right.
But serverless platforms go a step further. You just deploy your code, and the platform handles everything.
Wow.
The scaling, the resource allocation, even security patching.
So it's like Kubernetes on autopilot.
Pretty much, yeah.
I deploy my app, and the platform magically makes sure it runs smoothly and scales as needed.
Yeah, it can feel that way.
That sounds almost too good to be true.
It does have its limitations, of course. Not every application is well suited for a serverless environment.
Right.
But for certain use cases, especially those with highly variable workloads, serverless can be a real game changer for solo K8s managers. It frees you up from having to worry about infrastructure management altogether, so you can focus entirely on your application logic.
So less time wrestling with YAML files.
Exactly.
More time building awesome features.
Exactly.
I like that. What else is brewing in the world of solo K8s?
Another area that's evolving rapidly is the tooling around Kubernetes. We talked about IAC tools like Terraform and Pulumi. But there's a whole ecosystem of tools emerging to simplify various aspects of Kubernetes management. So, for example, there are tools that help you visualize and debug your cluster.
Okay.
Tools that automate security compliance, and even tools that help you manage costs.
So as Kubernetes matures, the tooling is becoming more specialized.
It is.
And user-friendly. That's encouraging, especially for those of us who aren't, hardcore infrastructure experts.
Yeah, exactly. And this trend towards specialization is likely to continue.
Okay.
We'll see more and more tools that cater to specific needs and workflows, making Kubernetes more accessible to a wider range of users, including solo developers and small teams.
So it sounds like the future of solo K8s management is all about finding the right balance
I think so.
between leveraging powerful tools and services and developing the skills and mindset to navigate this complex landscape effectively.
I think you're exactly right. It's about empowering solo developers and small teams to harness the power of Kubernetes without getting bogged down in the complexities.
This whole deep dive has been so insightful.
I'm glad.
We've covered so much ground, from the foundational principles of managed services and automation to the human aspects of managing our energy and building a strong support network.
Right, and we even peeked into the crystal ball to see what the future holds for solo K8s management.
We did. We barely scratched the surface, really.
Yeah, Kubernetes is such a rich and evolving ecosystem. But I hope this deep dive has given you a solid foundation and a sense of excitement for what's possible.
Absolutely. And if there's one key takeaway I hope our listeners walk away with, it's this. Solo K8s management is challenging,
It is.
but it's also incredibly rewarding.
It is.
And with the right tools, strategies, and mindset, it's definitely something you can master.
Well said. So to wrap things up, let me leave you with a challenge.
Okay, I love a good challenge.
What's one small step you can take this week to make your solo K8s journey a little bit smoother? Maybe it's experimenting with a new automation tool, exploring a serverless platform, or simply connecting with someone in the Kubernetes community.
Excellent advice. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Embrace the power of the community, keep learning, keep experimenting, and most importantly, have fun. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of solo Kubernetes management. Until next time, happy automating